A North Texas megachurch recently released details of an investigation to church members that revealed a former youth pastor sexually abused 14 girls at 2 different churches.
The former Denton Bible Church youth pastor is in federal prison right now, serving a sentence for sexually assaulting 2 girls on church youth trips. Now, one of his many victims is sharing her story publicly for the first time with Fox 4 News. And Lori Brown is in studio tonight with more. Lori.
Stephen, Heather, the victim says she wants to shine a light on what happened to the 14 girls because Denton Bible Church kept it in the dark for too long. We are not showing her face and have altered her voice to protect her identity.
A youth group became a feeding ground for a deviant, and we didn't know it. That was thought to be a trusted staff person.
He was very manipulative. He was really good at playing on the emotions of teenage girls. I felt special, and that's what he was preying on.
Denton Bible Church pastor Tommy Nelson, who is also a best-selling author of Christian books, told his congregation on May 1st that he was not only deceived, but used by the church's now former junior high youth director, Rob Shiflett.
One our church helped send to Dallas Seminary.
The same day as this addressed the congregation, the church made available by request a 5-page letter summarizing a 10-month-long investigation conducted by a third-party attorney.
We paid these guys to make sure that there was not any cover-up in our church.
Scott Fredericks, that attorney and third-party investigator, is not releasing the lengthy report, citing privacy concerns for the victims. But one of those victims did want to share her story with Fox 4 News.
It was a stack, like 2 dictionaries full of papers.
For public release, the private investigation was summarized in a 5-page update. It found many failures on the part of Denton Bible Church. But one victim who spoke with us says Pastor Nelson's address to the congregation did not acknowledge what church leaders knew and when they knew it.
Does it feel like they were more focused on keeping this in the dark or protecting themselves than helping to prevent it from happening to someone else?
You know what frustrates me the most about this story is the number of times I've been told we didn't know what to do. I don't really have words for that. I don't think you need a seminary degree to know what to do. You need to do the right thing. You need to take care of the victims, and you need to report to the police and CPS.
So all of this happened in the late 90s. It came to our attention in 2005. We didn't know it.
How old were you when you first met Rob?
13. He slowly treated me more like a girlfriend, and so as a young teenager, I knew something didn't feel right. I knew that I felt uncomfortable, and when he would do different things and touch me in ways that were inappropriate, he would ask me if it was okay, and if I said yes, he would keep doing it, and if I said no, he would ice me out emotionally.
According to federal prosecutors, one of the crimes the youth leader pleaded guilty to happened with a girl who was 14 at the time he met her at Denton Bible Church. In 1997, when the victim was 15 years old, Shiflett led an 8th grade camping trip to the Buffalo National River in Arkansas. He isolated her from the group, sexually assaulted her, and told her not to tell anyone. According to the church's May 1st letter, Pastor Tommy Nelson's first clues about Shiflett came before Shiflett left Denton Bible Church to go work for another church. Youth workers reported seeing Shiflett spending time alone with girls in his car, home, and a hotel room. The letter says 2 youth workers raised concerns directly to Pastor Nelson. Pastor Nelson told Shiflett's supervisor that he should not spend time alone with girls, but no one disciplined Shiflett. Another warning came in 1999. The church's letter says a college intern reported her discomfort and red flags to the wife of a youth pastor. Again, leaders did not discipline Shiflett. The college intern concluded she had not been believed. In 2001, the letter says Denton Bible turned down Shiflett's request to be promoted to the high school pastor position because of his pattern of being alone with girls. But Pastor Nelson did not share that information with a church in Little Rock, Arkansas, a church where Shiflett applied for a job as youth pastor. In fact, Pastor Nelson recommended him. The church's letter states there was no evidence that any information about Shiflett's tenure at Denton Bible or reasons he did not get the high school position was sought by or shared with anyone at Fellowship Bible. But that statement conflicts with this.
One whom I endorsed with what I thought to be true to a Bible church in Arkansas to be the head of their youth program. No one had a clue.
As youth director at Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock, the investigation found Shiflett abused 3 more girls. One sexual assault happened with a 16-year-old during a youth group trip in Panama City, Florida. The letter says the Arkansas church fired Shiflett in 2003. He moved back to live in Denton and continued the abuse of at least 1 girl. In 2005, 2 victims bravely came forward and told a counselor at Denton Bible about their abuse while minors by Shiflett. But instead of Denton Bible reporting this to authorities, church leaders confronted Shiflett themselves, and he admitted to the crimes. Both girls were 19 years old in 2005, so the law at that time did not require church leaders to report the abuse. But the victim we spoke with believes leaders in the church had a moral obligation to report it, to protect others.
We were 19 when we reported, and to navigate that on your own and to basically be abandoned by the church to do that is devastating.
The church's letter says the Denton Bible Church Elder Board voted to revoke Shiflett's ordination in 2005. And for years after that, Denton Bible alerted other organizations about Shiflett, including a school. Shiflett worked at Liberty Christian School from 2008 to 2010. Yet in his statement to his own congregation, Pastor Nelson claimed to have not known about Shiflett's crimes until a father of another victim came to him in 2015.
I was at the first unveiling of a father saying, I want to talk to him in your presence, and I'm going to tell him what I think. I said, what about? And we did. And I said, you're kidding. There was physical contact? Yes. And that was the first time. And then another, then another, and then another. And between us and Arkansas, there were 14 girls.
By 2015, the law did require a person or professional, including clergy, to report it to law enforcement if there was cause to believe an adult suffered sexual abuse as a child. But Denton Bible's pastor, Tommy Nelson, still failed to do so.
Tommy portrayed there was no cover-up. And I remember thinking, if there's no cover-up, what'd you do in 1999? If there's no cover-up, what did you do in 2005? What did you do in 2015?
What there was a lack of, well, times changed on us and we didn't change. Because this was something, a pedophile was a term I never heard from 1974 until 2005.
The failures Nelson did admit to.
We saw smoke of inappropriate behavior. We did not look for the fire, and we should have. We would now.
But experts say it's actually not the church's role to do their own investigation.
And we need to remember that abuse thrives in silence, right?
Lana Ahrens is with the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. She says anyone with a suspicion abuse has happened needs to report it to authorities.
Yes, you do not have to have proof. You do not have to have evidence. Actually, some of those things can, if you try to collect those things, that can actually hinder a criminal investigation.
Shiflett's crimes finally came to light in 2019 when the 2 victims who reported their abuse originally to Denton Bible back in 2005 realized they needed to tell law enforcement.
I feel like a light bulb came on for me that Rob was still living in North Texas and wasn't in prison.
The FBI began investigating in June last year, and a federal judge sentenced Shiflett to 33 months in prison.
I want it to be a warning to the global church that you cannot silence the voice of sex abuse victims in the church and expect to get away with it.
We asked Pastor Nelson for an interview 3 times. Our requests were declined.
And so even though I didn't do it, Curtis didn't do it, we were the guys in charge. It was on our watch.
While her abuse occurred in the church,
The role of a pastor is to care for the flock of God.
the victim we spoke with says it is her faith that has allowed her to heal.
I also believe that Jesus dearly cares about abuse. He cares about my story. He cares about all of the victims who've been hurt in the story, those that are known and unknown. And I'm proud of myself, but I also am so thankful to Jesus for his resurrection power that helped me come forward and do the right thing.
At Shiflett's sentencing, the federal judge lamented the plea deal agreed to by both parties was
too short of a sentence. The judge said, "I would have sent you away for 25 years. I think you are a danger to society." Shiflett is set to be released from prison in April next year. He will be required to register as a sex offender, and he was also sentenced to a lifetime of supervised release. Texas law requires anyone who has cause to believe a child has been abused or neglected to report it to the Department of Family Protective Services or law enforcement where the abuse occurred. Again, you don't need any proof to make a report. We've put a link to resources as well as Pastor Nelson's full statement to the congregation on our website. Steve.